After the atmospheric river this week, it's no wonder everyone's getting stoked for winter.
Hold up.
Good evening. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm Scott Montague from Coquitlam Search and Rescue, and I'm tracking along the ridges of Zoom this evening. Your cameras and mics are off for this session, but we still want to hear from you. If you have a question, throw it in the Q&A box and we can keep track of them. And we'll either answer live or we'll answer online. If you don't want the audience to see your name, just make sure to mark the question as anonymous. Also be keeping an eye on the chat box and posting relevant links there as we go. Also, don't forget the reactions button, probably somewhere around here. Let's try it now. So give me a thumbs up for every time you played in Avalanche Country within the last year. So if you played 100 times, you're gonna have to click 100 thumbs ups. That's a lot of thumbs. Look at them go. Wow. Also want to let you know that if you're sticking around with us on Zoom till the end, you'll have a chance to win a giveaway from our supporters, BrightSource and Rico, as well as a chance to win an AST1 course from Canada West Mountain School. If you don't know what that is, you'll probably find out this evening. No matter what, everyone's going to go home with a freebie from our sponsor, FatMap. To get us started, I'd like to welcome the Executive Director of AdventureSmart in BC, the cornice atop our search and rescue prevention in British Columbia, none other than Sandra Riches.
Thank you, Scott. Always a warm welcome. It's always a great kickoff with you. Thanks for joining me again tonight. Thanks everyone for coming to our winter webinar series. We're excited to get through these. We just love doing each one, and tonight's no different. Our guests will bring you expertise, experience, stories, and great examples of how you can be more prepared, how you can be adventure smart while you're out there. The whole premise behind what we do here for the BC Search and Rescue Association with the program, BC Adventure Smart, is to help reduce the number and severity of search and rescue calls. Every year, there's 1,500 incidents in BC currently. There's 78 search and rescue groups with 3,400 members. Scott's one of those members who respond to those incidents. We, myself included, have the responsibility to get trained, carry the equipment, make sure we're doing all the right things so that we're safe, and so is our group, and that we reach our destination. And our destination is always home. I'm really grateful tonight to welcome a special guest. We've had Avalanche Canada join us for a number of years, and it's always wonderful to have them come back. I go to their virtual stage, they come to our virtual stage. We're really industry cousins. We're about the same age, actually, programs, not me and our guest. The programs are coming up to their 20th anniversary. I know we turn 20 next year in 2024, and hopefully you can stick around and celebrate with us. We'll have a few things going on next year. This evening's guest will enlighten you, and I'd like to introduce him right now. Brad Christie is based in Revelstoke. He has spent 15 years in the avalanche industry as a ski patroller, avalanche technician, and now a public avalanche forecaster with Avalanche Canada. For some of us who call it AvCan. He also recently started contributing to a multi-year project to update and revamp Avalanche Canada's fatal avalanche accident database. In his spare time, you can find him at a ski resort based in Ravi there. We were just talking about it before we came on, or in the backcountry by day and skate skiing or playing guitar in a garage by night. Sounds pretty good to me. And I'm excited to welcome Brad to our virtual stage and look forward to your presentation, Brad. And the stage is all yours. And everyone, thanks again for joining us this evening. We're really grateful you're here, and feel free to toss us questions and keep in touch with us after this presentation. And as we wait for Brad to come to the stage, if you have to leave partway through this evening, which I hope you don't, and also if you wanted to watch it again, we upload all of these webinars to the BC SARA YouTube page. It's also on the BC SARA website. And you can watch this event and our more than 40 other events we've done in the past. Hi, Brad. Thanks for joining us. And the stage is all yours. Thanks, everyone. I'll be back after Brad's finished.
Great, thanks. Man, I realized in my bio, I made myself sound like I'm really getting after it, but I'm also probably most of the time just changing diapers and chasing my toddler. But I had some years before that to do other stuff. I'm just gonna share my screen here. All right, yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for tonight's webinar. I'm stoked to be here with you and talk about a few aspects of avalanche awareness, with one key focus: recognizing avalanche terrain. There's lots of folks here that might be new to avalanche terrain or recreating the backcountry, and folks who might know more, but I think there's going to be a bit for everyone in this presentation. So first of all, for those of you who are new to Avalanche Canada, the simple way to describe what we do is that we are the voice of public avalanche safety in Canada. We're a non-governmental, nonprofit organization, and a few things we focus on in our work is the daily avalanche forecast. That's our flagship product. But we also run avalanche awareness programs. We create the curriculum for recreational avalanche courses like the AST, and we're a general point of contact for avalanche information, be it for media or other purposes. We also support avalanche research at institutions like SFU. And in general, our goal is to encourage and educate people to recreate safely in the winter backcountry. We want more people to get outside. We want to inspire, engage, and empower recreationists to enjoy the backcountry and be safe from avalanches. Avalanche danger and avalanche safety are serious issues in Canada. The 10-year running average is 12 fatalities per year. So in order to start this process, we got to figure out what is an avalanche. Coming up, I'll show you a couple of different kinds, but overall, an avalanche occurs when a mass of snow releases from a mountainside and tumbles down a slope. If there's snow in the mountains and that's where you plan on recreating, then understanding and managing avalanche danger needs to be a part of your trip. So here's a video. Just back this up so we can, oh, we got sound. Sound is open. So here's a video of a slab avalanche, a dry slab avalanche. You can see how it keeps running, where it started. Wow. It keeps running down into flatter terrain. That's a good thing to think about if you're moving around in the backcountry. You don't need to be on an avalanche slope in order to be affected by an avalanche. Next video here is of a wet avalanche. You can see how it moves a little bit differently, kind of slower and heavier.
Sorry, trees.
That's one of our field team members apologizing to the trees that she's hitting. What is needed to form an avalanche? Snow, obviously, there needs to be enough of it. You need the right terrain. We'll talk about some more terrain characteristics that encourage avalanches in a bit, and a trigger. So triggers can be, in this case, looks like we had a human trigger. You can also have weather-based triggers or other just falling objects. We'll go into detail on that later. So with snow, you need enough accumulation to actually produce a smooth surface to slide on. So that's kind of this part of the season we're really at right now, is that we've gone from a lot of areas not quite having, still being pretty rough. The rocks, the underbrush is still kind of kept things rough, but we just had a couple big storms there, and now we're starting to get into a place where the surface is smooth enough for snow to slide on. So here's a picture that shows terrain that is still in general too rough. We see lots of the rocks sticking out. We see small bushes, but you can see off in the distance some of the peaks up there. If we were to get up there, some of those might have enough roughness to be an avalanche threat, or sorry, have enough smoothness to be an avalanche threat. So what we're really thinking about is the threshold, and the threshold is the amount of snow required before an avalanche can form. Rough terrain like that already is really bouldery or lumpy takes a lot longer. It takes a lot more snow to reach threshold than smooth terrain. And so that's part of why generally the alpine reaches threshold first. You have these big smooth slopes, kind of scree slopes, or big flat rock faces, things like that. And there's often more snow in the alpine, so it can happen sooner. So our next picture, now we're seeing a bit more smoothness to the surfaces. This picture, a lot of the terrain is maybe just on the threshold of being enough for an avalanche, but we know for sure if more snow falls on top of this, there's the potential for an avalanche. The ground is not rough enough to stop it now. So the next main thing to talk about with terrain is the slope angle. So the majority of avalanches start on a slope 30 degrees or greater. The terrain in this picture we can see is 36 degrees. Here's a picture of terrain that is probably too low angle. Pretty rare that an avalanche could actually start in this terrain. If we have steeper terrain above us, that's still something to watch out for, but we'll get into that later. The one exception that sometimes low angle slopes that you wouldn't quite expect to avalanche but can still go is sometimes surface hoar problems. I've seen some of those, but it'll be like a once in every 15 or 20 years weird thing. And definitely when you look at the avalanche forecast, it will talk about that. And we'll get to the avalanche forecast later and the other resources on our webpage. So yeah, in this low angle situation, the snow is held in place by gravity. It's probably not going anywhere. On the other end of the spectrum, when the terrain is too steep, you will get constant little loose snow avalanches. It'll just kind of keep shedding a little bit at a time, and it's not going to hold on to enough snow to really build up and cause a big destructive avalanche. Those small avalanches can still be a hazard when terrain traps are involved, and that's another thing we're going to talk about soon. So yeah, the too steep or too low angle, and we might not be able to form enough of a slab and get the gravity pulling on it to form an avalanche. Most common slope angles. So I know we probably have all sorts of different recreators in the audience, but if you are skiing or snowboarding, pretty much the sort of terrain that you want to go downhill in is pretty prime for avalanches as far as angle. So 30 to 45 degrees is what we're probably going to spend most of our time in if we're snowboarding or skiing. People who are snowmobiling or snowshoeing definitely have a lot of other options open to them with flatter slopes. Another terrain factor is trees and vegetation. So areas definitely with no trees, obviously trees aren't a factor, but even when there's sparse trees, like in this photo, an avalanche can still move through that pretty easily. The other thing is that an area like this, where it looks like the trees have seen a lot of damage, that could be an indication that it gets hit by a lot of avalanches from above. So that's a good thing to watch out for, is look for spots where trees have seen damage, or open slopes. Just open slopes or openly treed, sparsely treed slopes are more likely to avalanche than dense trees like this. This photo also shows really flat terrain, so as we talked about earlier, but even if you're on a slope, dense trees like this are less likely to have an avalanche start in them. And it's a good indication that it's been a really long time, however many years old those trees are before a big avalanche has come and moved those or destroyed those trees. Or maybe a place that just there's not steep terrain around it that it's possible to do that. So we've covered snow, we've covered terrain, and now we talk triggers, which is really where we come in because if we're out there, we have the potential, of course, to directly trigger avalanches. It doesn't matter if you're snowshoeing, skiing, snowboarding, hiking, snowmobiling, you're on your way to an ice climb. If we are humans in the snow, in the terrain, we have the potential to cause avalanches. Other things can cause avalanches, so objects, cornices. If you're familiar with cornices, you can see in this picture along the ridge on the right, there's those overhanging chunks of snow that the wind has formed. Cornices can be avalanches in and of themselves when they fall off, but they can also be big and heavy and can be a trigger that makes another avalanche happen on the slope below. So they are definitely a thing to watch. And falling rocks onto a slope can trigger an avalanche. Snow from trees or cliffs, especially when it's the first sunny day in a long time, or first sunny day after a storm, or the first really warm day after a period of cold weather. And snow can fall from trees and cliffs and trigger avalanches. And explosives, which I think for most folks trying to just get out and recreate in the backcountry on their own, they're not likely to be encountering explosives, but we will talk about situations where explosives help manage the risk for you when you're at ski hills or driving on the highway. Weather can also be a trigger for avalanches. So snowfalling can add load to a slope and start an avalanche. Same thing with wind moving the snow around. It can load more snow onto a slope more rapidly, make it more dense, and make it more likely to avalanche. Often we get the combination of snow and wind together, so you get a greater chance then. You'll see us talking about that during really stormy periods in the avalanche forecast. Warm weather causes the snow on top especially to get denser, get wetter, heavier, and kind of like make it not stick together as well in the short term. And avalanches are more likely then. And strong sunny days can do the same thing. Sometimes even when the temperature is not that warm, the sun itself can warm the snowpack and have a similar effect to warm weather. So here's a quick animation just showing, summarizing what we've covered so far. So we really need all three factors to be in place for an avalanche to happen. We need enough snow, and we need the right terrain, and we need a trigger, whether it's us or weather or something falling from above. Another factor of terrain, I talked a little bit about terrain traps earlier. So I think it's fairly obvious in this picture, these people are in sort of a little box canyon. It's a contained area. If snow falls into that, it's going to pile up a lot faster than if that was an open slope. So this makes a smaller avalanche potentially more danger to a human that's moving through this space. So this is definitely a thing to watch out for. And it's the reality of sometimes just trying to get to a certain objective or place, we got to move through these spaces to get there. So we need to be able to make decisions about whether we feel like it's a safe day to do that or not, because it's more risky to move through a space like this. Other types of terrain traps, it might not be really that trap-like, but the picture on the left, we've got some cliffs. And so even a small avalanche, if it just knocks you off your feet, that if you're on a smooth terrain, wouldn't cause you much injury. Now you're falling over a cliff and the consequences are potentially bigger. The photo on the right, the trees there, if you get swept off your feet by an avalanche and into those trees, you can potentially have a traumatic injury, as opposed to just being worried about getting buried. So there's definitely other factors in terrain than just the steepness. Another thing we want to look at in terrain, and I talked about this a bit earlier, is overhead hazard. So looking at this picture, we've got these big open slopes above us, and we can see the cornices hanging over the ridge. If any of those broke off, just one of them themselves could hurt us, or it could trigger an avalanche on the slope below. So we got to be really thinking about what terrain we're moving under and how close we are to it. Overhead hazard can happen on small slopes too. So this is a much smaller slope, but we can still see some pretty big cornice chunks up there, and it looks like maybe some kind of wetter snow below. So those can both be a significant danger to a human, and we gotta be watching out how close we are to those things. And you can see here kind of the path that this guy on the snowmobile is on. If he were coming through at the time that stuff was falling, he could be at risk. So the ski tour in this photo is heading into some terrain that has overhead hazard. And I think by now, probably most of the people watching could think of a couple reasons why, but we're looking up. When we look up, we see there's cornices on the ridge. So they are a hazard in and of themselves, but also they could indicate that recently there has been wind transport loading the slopes just below the cornices. So that's more of a threat. So we're thinking like, is there the potential for natural avalanches to come down on me? Also looking at this vegetation, like just in the very right and very left of this photo, it's maybe not a great photo to illustrate it, but you can see denser trees. But this person is kind of about to walk into a much more open area with some little scraggly trees. Look like they've maybe been through a lot more. So there is the potential that it's likely that this is a large avalanche path that probably runs once or maybe multiple times a season. So we've got to think about, is this the sort of day that could happen, and do we want to be there? So when we're in avalanche terrain, there are different ways that risk is managed. So on our right here, we've got a ski resort. That's Sunshine Village, sorry. So the company that runs the ski resort is responsible for managing the avalanche risk there, and they empower their ski patrollers to do that. Sunshine's a great example for this. Is we also have public roads on the left side there, and so avalanche control is done there on the road up to the ski hill and on the Trans-Canada a bit further in the distance by Parks Canada. So they're helping manage that avalanche risk for drivers on the roads who may be headed to the backcountry or the ski hill, or they may just be headed through to their next destination. And then in the background here, we have all this backcountry terrain where no specific company or group is managing the avalanche risk. So when you're driving on public roads, here's an example of an avalanche that's come across the road. And there are different highway operations that are responsible for minimizing this risk. So if you're in a national park, it's going to be Parks Canada. So Glacier National Park and Banff, Yoho, Kootenay, etc. Anywhere that's not in a national park in British Columbia is going to be the Ministry of Transportation is managing that avalanche risk. They manage it in a number of ways. So just closing the road when they're concerned that there's the potential of avalanches coming across the road. That's an easy way to keep people out of the risky area. There's also no stopping zones, just to sort of manage the ongoing risk all winter, to keep people moving through areas that have avalanche potential. There are sometimes just permanent structures, whether they're dug out of dirt and big trenches at the side of the road, or large earth barriers or lumps to help slow down the movement of the avalanche, or sometimes large concrete walls or other structures, snow sheds, to help either stop the avalanche from hitting the road or allow the traveler to drive underneath the structure and the avalanche can move over it. They also engage in active avalanche control, mostly using explosives. There's a variety of different explosive styles that they can use to control these. So the road is of course closed when this is happening, and then allows them to safely bring down a bunch of snow and then get it cleared out, and before reopening a safer road to the public. So here we have a video. I'm just gonna back up and see if I can get the sound on this one. So this is some avalanche control on the highway using a remote avalanche control system that's mounted up on the top of these peaks. So we can see this is a pretty large avalanche affecting that could go all the way down to the road. And so if we're at the ski hill, they're going to manage they're also going to manage the avalanche danger with closures in some cases, where they feel the terrain is not safe to go into at this time. It's also good to watch out for some of those closures might not be for avalanches, and they may never be open. There may just be risky terrain like big unskiable cliffs that they want to keep people out of all the time. But you'll see signs like this. So on the left, we have the caution avalanche danger, sometimes in more challenging terrain where small avalanches could continue happening through storms, but they're feeling confident that it's generally safe for people to go into. In the middle, we have the closed signs where either the avalanche danger is too high, or it's entirely likely that avalanche control with explosives is going on the other side of that rope line, and ski patrollers are trying to get terrain ready to open for people. And then we have the sign on the right showing the ski area boundary, marking where there is no longer any avalanche control. So if you're leaving that ski area boundary, you are now in the backcountry and you are responsible for managing the avalanche risk. So the ski patrol is only responsible for reducing the likelihood of triggering an avalanche inside the ski area boundary. And they should have signage marking clearly where they do that, where they don't. At common backcountry exit points from the ski hill, you might see bigger signs like this with more information. It's good to read them. Especially the one on the right has a great checklist of like, hey, are you ready for doing this today? Or, is there maybe some more information you could seek today, or, some training you could do? Do you have all your gear with you? It's a good check for everyone, regardless of experience, before they're heading out into the uncontrolled backcountry. Here we've got a video of some ski patrollers doing explosives avalanche control. That's a good thing. They're doing that before there's skiers in it. This is explosives delivered by a helicopter. So that's another way that both in highways and on ski hills, you can see the slab avalanche breaking off there. So we're not on a public road. We're not at a ski hill. And we're out in the backcountry. It's everywhere else. And it is now, if you are out in the backcountry, it is now your responsibility for understanding where you are and where you are at risk and how to effectively reduce the risk. And I mean, today I'm only talking about the avalanche risk. Of course, there are lots of other risks in the backcountry, and it's an endless journey of learning on how to try and make safe choices out there. Here's another picture of a common backcountry access point. There's lots of informational signs up there. Some of them have ATES ratings. I don't know if you've heard of ATES before, but it stands for Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale. There's more information about it on our website under the Learn tab, avalanche.ca under the Learn tab. And that helps people decide if they're in a terrain that's relatively simple to make avalanche decisions, more challenging or complex. And I won't go into too many details on how that works, but it's an aid in decision making, and there's lots of information on our website. And so I bet a lot of you are in this boat that now we're saying, okay, so I've learned about avalanches. I've learned how other people can manage avalanche risk. I've learned that if I'm in the backcountry, it's up to me. So that's me. I travel in areas where the avalanche hazard isn't managed by others. What do I do now? So that's a main part of what we're trying to help with, what we do. So www.avalanche.ca has a ton of resources. The homepage that you'll get taken to shows our avalanche forecasts on a map. You should be able to, if you have your location enabled on your computer or on your phone, we have a phone app as well. I believe now they've got it, so it's you can get it on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. And it should, if you have your location enabled, it should automatically show you where you are on the map, and you can click on the relevant forecast. So one thing that was new last season, you may have already seen this a bunch of times, or this may be new information to you, is now we have flexible forecast regions, or flexible forecast boundaries. We used to have set regions, and that definitely had some limitations. So now we're able to move boundaries around, merge areas together, or split them apart. And this helps us better reflect the avalanche conditions and the danger in each of those areas. We're forecasting for pretty large areas, so we're still not really at the level of like a ski hill where we're really pinpointing what's happening in our area, but it definitely gives us a lot more power to better reflect what is happening in these different areas. And so we now have 92 sub-regions that we can potentially use. 2 of those are in the Yukon, or sorry, one's in the Yukon and one is in the Newfoundland now. So 90 of those are in British Columbia. And we usually divide those into, it ends up being divided into somewhere around 16 forecasts, sometimes more, sometimes less. So if you're going to our website, you can go to the Start Here page. So under Learn, there's a New to the Backcountry and Start Here. So this is a great place to start, obviously. There's lots of other great stuff under the Learn tab. There's a ton of resources on this page. We'll talk about a few other things later. Also very essential to get the gear that you need. So a transceiver is a small electronic device worn really close to your body that transmits a radio signal. And if you are buried, your companions that are with you or a rescue team that comes out later are able to switch their same devices to receiving, and they can use that radio signal along with their device to find a buried person or buried transceiver that is hopefully attached to that person. One important thing to note about transceivers, I'm off track there. You're also going to need a probe. So the transceiver helps get you close, but you're going to need the probe so you can see this is articulated. You fold it out into a straight probe that you can stick into the snow, and you can pinpoint how deep and exactly where a person is. All right, that was the important thing I was going to say about transceivers. I mentioned that the people you're with can find you, or search and rescue, or other groups that come upon you. That's definitely, those are all options, but if you are buried, your best chance for survival is with the people you are with. So making sure that all of the people you are with are fully equipped with all this gear is really important. And that you are with other people and not just on your own. Also, having a shovel is very important. And with all this gear, it's really important to practice and know how to use it and know how to use the stuff that you have. And the shovel is included in that. It's not just like shoveling your driveway or making a snow fort. Shoveling an avalanche is pretty different. The snow has generally kind of set up and is hard. And so it's good to practice effective rescue shoveling techniques. It can really make the difference between life or death. Another great place to get information on our website under the Learn tab is the AvSavvy. So it's sort of all in one online avalanche tutorial. There's a ton of information in there, some great videos. I was mentioning the avalanche terrain exposure scale earlier, or AITS. So there's a specific video on that. Yeah, it'll kind of talk about all the things I'm talking about today, but we'll go into more detail. So that's one really great resource on our site. It's a great starting place as well. Really, we believe that anyone who's going out and recreating in the backcountry in the winter where there's enough snow for avalanches, it's good to get an AST1 or Avalanche Skills Training 1 course. It's a great place to start. There's on our website, you can find, you should be able to find courses near you. We set the curriculum, but we don't conduct the courses. So we'll direct you to organizations near you that will offer courses. And there's Avalanche Skills Training 2 courses and other courses. There's lots of different education opportunities, but the AST is a great place to start for recreationalists and also professionals. That's where I started a long time ago as well. So in summary, it's really important to know what is involved in making avalanche terrain. And we talked about that earlier. Steepness is really important. So really think about the incline and not just of where you are. Think of how close you are to steep slopes that are above you. Or if you're near a ridge edge, like how close are you to the edge of that cornice? So recognize what makes that terrain along with incline. We want to think about vegetation cover. So dense trees, less likely to avalanche, open trees, more likely. And really, I think a good thing that got told to me on a course a long time ago, and I still try to remember that, I mean, it's really easy to think of it from a skiing or snowboarding perspective, but I think you could probably, or snowmobiling as well, I think it's pretty easy to imagine it if you're on foot, is if a space is big enough for you to want to ski through easily, and if that looks like a fun slope, it's probably steep enough and open enough to avalanche. So when we say dense trees, we're meaning pretty dense. So like a bit more challenging to move through, you're more likely walking or you're skinning on your split board or skis, or you're moving slow on your snowmobile. We're thinking about our overhead hazard. So whether it's a small slope or a large slope, is there something above me that could be threatening me? And should I pick a different path or should I turn around today? We want to think about threshold snow depth for avalanches. We might not know exactly what the slope roughness is like underneath, but if we can't see that, then it's probably deep enough to avalanche. So if you can see the rocks and trees and things sticking out right from the ground in the dirt, we're not quite at threshold yet. Yeah, we want to be aware of the risks and who's responsible for them. So if we're at a ski hill, of course, there are lots of different risks, and there are risks of little tiny loose snow avalanches that could knock us off our feet if we're in really extreme terrain or something. But overall, the responsibility is on the ski hill to manage that. If we're on a public road, it's managed by Ministry of Transportation or Parks Canada. But if we're in the backcountry, we are responsible. So how to be prepared? So the thing we always say is get the gear, get the training, and get the forecasts. So gear, starting with transceiver, shovel, probe at the very least, and get the training, AST1s or more, and get the forecasts at avalanche.ca, along with a ton of other good learning material there. Yeah, that's how you can be prepared and know where to access more information and inform yourself. There's a ton of resources on our webpage. So when snow is the problem, terrain is the answer. Managing avalanche risk in the backcountry or anywhere is a challenge for everyone, including professionals with 30 years of experience, people who are managing this risk. It's just a challenging thing to manage. There's always some level of uncertainty. So terrain is the best way to address that uncertainty. Move further away from steep slopes. Stay on less steep slopes on days where you're concerned about avalanches. Use denser trees while you're traveling to keep yourself in a safer area. Yeah, terrain is a really, really important tool in managing your exposure to avalanche risk. All right, that was my presentation for today. Thanks everyone for joining. We got some time for questions, I believe.
Oh, and we've got questions. Holy cannoli.
Ooh, hopefully I got the answers.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't think we're going to get to them all, but I'm going to try. And apologies to anyone who I don't get to. I'm also going to do some grouping together. So there's some discussions about when things get warmer. Is risk always going to be worse when it's warmer? Or like, are the cornice dangers warmer? Is it more likely that you're going to have any other dangers increase when things get warmer?
Yeah, cornices. I mean, I guess the best way to say it is that any rapid warming destabilizes the whole snowpack, or the snowpack anywhere. It might just be the surface at the start. Kind of depends how rapid. But rapid warming is a big concern. Also, just anytime it's warming up as it's getting warmer, we're increasing the likelihood of cornices falling off, where the snow that was stuck together before is now less stuck together. It's getting wetter, it's kind of lubricated, it's getting denser and heavier. We often think about a snowpack as like a Jenga tower, and as you take blocks out of the bottom and put them on top, sort of, if the top is getting denser and denser and the bottom is not, it's now more likely to get pulled by gravity down. But the other side of that is that long-term warming can have a stabilizing effect on the snowpack. So of course, if it's like staying 15 degrees for a week on end, we're melting, we're just kind of like staying in a relatively unstable pattern. And although we might just shed all the snow or melt it all, and then the risk goes down.
So it sounds like if you have a really strong sunny days, it's during that initial warming where things are worse than, let's say, if you tried to get out before that, or you tried to get out like later in the day, you're better?
I wouldn't say later in the day. I think that
as early as possible.
Yeah. If you're getting out earlier is better for sure. On those days, or sometimes it's just not the day for that. If it's a big warm up, we get into, I guess, oh wow, it's easy how like even just a small thing can get into a really complicated risk discussion. I'll quickly touch on things like spring diurnal cycles. So like the daily gets warm, it gets cold overnight. This happens everywhere. It's like especially prominent in the Rockies, where it stays colder at night through the spring, where in the morning things are frozen and it's really stable. And so you can really travel and you can get out there. But then as the sun and warm temperatures get at the snowpack, it destabilizes over the day. So that's one, like you were mentioning, Scott, that it's really important to manage your timing that day and get out and get where you're wanting to go while it's easy to travel. Hopefully catch a little bit of soft corn snow on the top on your way down or out, and then be out of there before the heat of the afternoon. But yeah, temperature and sun are also a factor in the middle of the winter, and it needs to be managed totally differently because you aren't getting that same refreeze super stabilization overnight.
When you're doing your pre-planning, you're going to a place you've never been before. Obviously, we're going to be taking a look at the avalanche forecast for that area. How would you use maps and topographical maps and other things to sort of plan out a path if you don't have one available? Is that something that can be a resource?
Yeah, it definitely can be a resource. Yeah, if you're good at reading topographical maps and seeing areas that are steep or areas that are flat on there, you can at least get a sense of where the slope of the terrain is conducive to you moving through safely. That being said, even a really good topographical map is not going to capture really small terrain features. So once you're out there, you're going to have to be making ongoing decisions, but definitely if you're really comfortable reading topographic maps, it can help in your planning. There's also, if you go to the, under the resources tab on our website, there's a trip planner. And so there's a number of recreational areas that have been AITS mapped. I mentioned that earlier, the Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale, and it can help you pick common routes and pick ways that are safer. Lots of those, there's a ton of snowmobiling recreation areas that have been mapped. There's some like up in Smithers, the Hank and Evelyn kind of little ski touring area has been mapped. And yeah, the snowmobile area is pretty heavily, but there's other really common recreation areas that have been AITS mapped. Lots of the national parks as well have those made. So that's another resource mapping related.
So we had a person talking about the Mountain Information Network, and can you easily show where previous avalanches have been spotted over the years so that you can go, you know what, that's very, very likely to happen in the first few weeks of the year or whatever like that, because that's always a place that tends to get hit. And is that something that you can easily glean from the information that you have?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's a functionality that we have on the Mountain Information Network right now. It's definitely a tool that researchers can use to look at those things over time. We have different colored pins that can designate if someone's just making a general report or if there's an avalanche. One tough thing is those aren't always reliable, because sometimes people just put in a quick report and they mention an avalanche, but they didn't tag it as an avalanche or put something in the avalanche thing, which is totally fine. It's just better that people are getting information out there, period. We want to encourage people to get on there and use it. And if what you feel like you have time for is a quick post, hopefully people can read the whole thing and get that info. And you're going to want to read everything that's near you in recent, in the recent time before you're heading out, because there might be details. Just because someone didn't see an avalanche doesn't mean there's not really helpful details with avalanche conditions, or just details on what the conditions are like in that place. That's an interesting idea, though, about thinking about, common places it happens. The tough part of that is that every season is totally different. So some seasons your common performers don't go at all. And other seasons, places that aren't normally a common avalanche area, that are possible, but it's not super often, goes a whole bunch of times. So that's maybe another reason why we might not enable it in that way, but definitely it's a research tool.
It's also interesting because you do drop your pin somewhere, and the guarantee that the person's dropped the pin in exactly the right place to indicate where it is, as opposed to just like the map is really big. You could go a few kilometers over with a centimeter, right?
Yeah, totally.
And you can be aiming for Cerise Creek and you get something completely different, Wendy Thompson Hut or something. So it really does matter where that's placed. So the information is very useful, like you said, if you read through it, but graphically, I'm not necessarily certain that you'd get exactly what you need.
Yeah, I mean, for a quick example, like you said, the MIN is a super useful information tool, and we just kind of have to be aware of the limitations. And as public avalanche forecasters, we're looking at the MIN all the time. It's super useful information for us, but we're going to use that information a little bit differently than we use information from our field teams or from professional organizations.
Once a slide's already happened in an area, does that mean that that area is now more stable? Or have we just exposed something and now we can have more of a chance of a slide?
I don't think there's a definitive always answer to that. I'll try to run through like a common occurrence. So let's say we have a hypothetical snowpack that we know is overall fairly stable. We have one glaring problem in there, like a big layer of feathery 20 millimeter surface hoar crystals. We're getting whoops everywhere we go. But we see this one slope that is avalanched, and it's very obvious that it's avalanched on that layer. Given that there are no other risks, avalanche worries in the snowpack in that place at that time, and given that there's not sort of, we call it hang fire, like remaining chunks of snow on that slope to look like they could still avalanche with a little bit more encouragement. That slope is potentially a bit safer, but I wouldn't say that's a blanket rule. I'd say it's just another piece of information you can take in and think about it. I'll go to the other end of the spectrum and say one thing that can happen on a slope that has avalanched or ones that commonly avalanche, something that gets talked about sometimes in these places like highways where there is, or ski hills sometimes, that there is common avalanche control, is that we're artificially keeping the snowpack shallower. And I'm getting a little deeper on snowpack metamorphosis here, but these are the sort of things you'd talk about on an AST1, is when the snowpack is shallow, it's more likely to facet, which weakens the snowpack. So
Gotcha.
That's the other side, where long-term avalanches on a slope do not indicate that that risk is gone. It could actually be creating other problems.
I'm only going to have a chance to get a couple more in here. Unless can you go maybe in an extra 5 minutes, maybe?
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool. I'll see if I can get go a little bit faster here. How can I tell the difference between trees that were damaged by previous avalanches and trees that were just damaged by a windstorm?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is, like, especially with big trees, you're gonna want to look on the lower branches and look on the uphill side. So trees that were damaged by an avalanche, if they're big enough, will look pretty fine and healthy, or not that they're unhealthy if they've lost some branches, but they're going to have lots of branches up high and maybe even on the downhill side of the bottom of the tree. But if you see a bunch, no branches on the bottom meter, a couple meters on the uphill side of the tree, that's an indication of damage from an avalanche. Or if they're smaller trees and they're still sticking out a bit, if you're just seeing damage that looks like they've been tipped downhill or smashed downhill so many times. Sometimes going out to an avalanche path in the summer, you can see all these little scraggly, tough trees that have just been through a lot, but they're all kind of bent over, pointing down slope.
Yeah. Why is the apex area not a forecast area? Why are there parts of the province that have no forecasts?
I mean, that's a bigger question. That's definitely up at my boss's level. We're definitely trying to cover as much as we can. We are a nonprofit organization, so some of our areas are determined by where our funding comes from. There are some places that are politically more challenging for us to be able to get into. We would love to cover as much of the area that is being recreated in as possible, and we are always looking to expand our area. So, for example, in the up in our Yukon forecast area, which actually a lot of it is in BC, but we've added Haines Pass last year. And so I don't think it's going to be for all season, but for part of the season, we're going to forecast for Haines Pass. We added Newfoundland last year. Or 2 years ago. There's an area in Newfoundland we now forecast for. And years before I started, there was a Northwest region, and then for a while there wasn't a Northwest, and now we've got Northwest again. So yeah, I hope that answered that question. I guess it's well above my power and full understanding, but we are always trying to cover more area if we can, based on
resources,
whatever our bosses can manage.
Yeah, resources and priorities is what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
So we've got some gear questions about transceivers and where to rent backcountry gear. I'm going to encourage people to go and look at our Adventure Hub. When you exit out of this thing, the Adventure Hub will actually come up with all sorts of places that you can go to, and local to your area. You can see outdoor clubs where you can get more information. You can see vendors and places like that. So I'll redirect your questions there. My apologies. I am trying to get everything in. And I'm going to actually ask that Sandra come back on for a second, because I have a question that both of you can help me with. So Person asks, why did the sign in one of your sample signs ask if I am willing to assume rescue cost? Cost of doing rescues. Maybe Sandra wants to take a first crack at that.
I will take a crack at it. Thanks, Scott. In British Columbia, there's no charge for rescue. That's the short answer. And everyone who knows me, I'm great at long answers. So the short answer in BC, there is no charge for search and rescue. No matter if you're a resident, a traveler, visitor, newcomer, and you need search and rescue's assistance, the number is 911 and there's no charge. Any signage that might be out there, maybe Brad can elaborate to the sign that was in his slide deck there. It could have been out of province. I also work a lot with other affiliates in Canada, and we reference charging for rescue outside of Canada in different parts of the world. There is a charge depending on where you travel, where you go. But we also know for sure in British Columbia that there is no charge. And there's a great statement on the BC Search and Rescue Association's website that really expands that. You know, a few key points there is it could delay a phone call to that 911 number if you think it's $10, 10,000, 100,000. I'm just making up numbers here. It could encourage you to possibly phone a friend, not like the game shows, but in real life, you might think, I'm going to phone Scott. He knows the area really well. He snow shows here all the time. He can get me out of this pickle, which also delays my call to emergency services, which delays the search and rescue incident from beginning and coming to help me and bring me home. But for that unique sign, Brad, maybe you're able to elaborate on that sign that was in your deck and collectively answer this question.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I think in each case, it's the choice of the ski area that's putting up what they put on the sign. So I don't know for sure exactly their reason for putting that on that sign. Maybe they're in a situation where their ski patrollers are often ending up being the first responders. I don't, you know, the years I worked on a ski patrol, I don't know of any time where a person was actually charged for their rescue. So that's maybe not the best thing to put on a sign, but I guess it's okay. It's in the slide because it brings up a discussion. I think the general spirit of the sign, though, is encouraging you to realize that, you know, first and foremost, you're on your own. If things do go really wrong, we're very lucky in BC to have people to help us. But we don't want to go out there being like, oh, I'm okay today. Those people have my back. You know, we really want to make sure we're prepared first, and that, you know, it's awesome we have those people there to help us. And we've got that as a last resort if something goes wrong. Don't delay your call to them. If something's going wrong, definitely get people coming, but head out there for the day, planning to do your absolute best to take care of yourself. And yeah, get all the training experience you can beforehand.
It could also be possible that it could be something rather relatively benign, like it happens to be one of those resorts that are owned by a company that has things in the States, and they have the things in Australia, and they have things in, and they just went out and bought 1,000 signs that all look exactly the same, and then distributed them to all of their different sites. And that's also possible, right? It could be something relatively benign like that.
Yeah, so I think Sandra is much more the authority on that than me, and that's great that we don't get charged for rescue in BC. We're very lucky for that reason.
Yes, and that's the stance of the BC Search and Rescue Association that supports the 78 groups and the 3,400 volunteers and BC AdventureSmart. Each unique ski area resort, though, within their CRA, their controlled recreation area, they have abilities within that controlled rec area, within their boundary, if they choose to activate that. I know a lot of ski patrollers, like you mentioned, Brad, support the local search and rescue group, support the system, aid where they can, assist. They're also a part of search and rescue in their area. So there's a lot of crossover there. To let the participants know tonight, there's a lot of us who work in many different facets of outdoor recreation, if it's a patroller, an educator, a first responder, a GSAR member. So there's lots of us who wear many hats, I guess. But again, that ski resort area could they do have at Liberty too. They often don't, though, however. But yeah, just a friendly reminder, there's no charge for search and rescue in BC. Please don't hesitate to phone, and the number is 911.
At this point in time, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a break, and we're going to stay with us. Stay with us, because you're going to have the possibility of winning. There's a whole bunch of things. There's one of those lamps from Bright Source. We've got a Reco reflector thingy. We've got an AST1 course. Oh, we've got everyone's going to go home with a prize that you get in the mail tomorrow in an email. But what I'm going to get you to do is watch one video for me. And then when we come back from that, we're going to ask you some questions about what you heard from Brad earlier today. And if you happen to answer them fast, you might get a prize. So let's go ahead and watch that video now.
So, you want to be AdventureSmart. Good.
But what is being AdventureSmart?
Being AdventureSmart is really all about taking responsibility for your own safety and following the 3 T's.
Got it. What are the 3 T's?
What are the 3 T's? The 3 T's are the trifecta of outdoor safety: trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. The 3 T's can vary from person to person, activity to activity, and season to season. But here are some important ways to ensure you are prepared and safe on your next adventure. Trip planning. We could go on forever about this one. Trip planning is an essential step and one of the easiest ways we can stay safe on our adventures. This is something that should be done every time we head into the outdoors, whether for a few hours or multiple days. Trip planning can be broken down into 4 simple steps. Planning your travel route and navigation is about picking a trail or route based on its difficulty that's relative to your experience, ability, and the amount of time you have. Know your limits. Not all trails are created equal, so know the terrain and conditions. A 10-kilometer hike scrambling straight up a steep mountain is a lot different than a 10-kilometer stroll around a lake. Before you go anywhere, check the weather and keep checking it as things can change fast. This includes wind, precipitation, temperature, and sunset times. Finally, make sure you leave a comprehensive trip plan with a trusted contact. Keep in mind, this may not be your mom or dad or best buddy. Choose someone you can count on if you were to get into trouble. A comprehensive trip plan might be as simple as sending your trusted contact a text or email with key information about your activity, or using the AdventureSmart app, which allows you to enter a detailed trip plan. Training doesn't mean being an elite athlete or being queen of the mountain on Strava. Training is a continuous process of outdoor recreation. It's about developing the necessary skills and abilities to be safe. This might include working your way up to that big summit hike, taking a few courses to expand your wilderness and backcountry knowledge, navigation and route finding courses, or even learning more advanced skills like rescue and emergency training. You have planned and trained. Now make sure you take the essentials. Taking the essentials means packing everything you potentially need to stay warm, safe, and dry if an emergency unexpectedly arises. What if you rolled your ankle or got hurt? What if you got lost and had to spend the night outdoors? Take the time and be prepared to look after yourself. So that's it. Those are the 3 T's.
That's it.
But no matter how hard you train, how well you trip plan, and how much essential gear you bring, you may still find yourself in an emergency. And that's okay. The wilderness can be unpredictable. If you find yourself in an emergency, it's important to stop, think, observe, and plan. Use that essential gear you brought to stay warm, dry, and safe, and contact 911 on your emergency communication device. Remember, search and rescue in BC is free for everyone. Remember, safety is an outcome of good trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. It's your responsibility. So let's all do our part and be AdventureSmart.
There you go. So let's crack at her. Sandra. And you can come back too if you so choose. Our good friend Brad. And we
The
can
questions here.
go
So
ahead
as
and
we
ask
get,
questions.
and Brad's welcome to join us and be a part of this if he likes. He can't compete though. He can't enter. He can just sit there and watch what we do here at the end as we close up. Thanks everyone for joining us. Why don't we conclude with some giveaways? We really want to share our appreciation with a few little giveaways. One of them is bigger than little, I think, and I know those of us on the screen here have all had the pleasure of taking an AST, but I'll save that for the end. The first two prizes, and we'll play the game the same for all prize giveaways. And again, we have 3. You have to get your fingers ready and your brain thinking.
And this was
Questions
Canada West
from-
Mountain School, right? If I recall correctly.
The prize
this-
for the AST is from Canada West, but I'm going to save that to the end. I'm going to go with the first 2.
Okay.
We're going to start with Reco. We're going to have a Reco giveaway, and get your fingers ready. The answer to the question will have come from tonight's presentation. So I'm sure we all listened at the edge of our seats to Brad's presentation tonight. And the first question is if you could put it into the chat. Scott, would you like chat?
Chat, please.
Chat, please. Here's your answer. Or, no, here's the answer. Here's the question. The
Makes
question
it really
is,
easy that way.
It would, wouldn't it? What does MIN stand for?
MIN.
MIN. Brad mentioned it a few times, and oh, I can see answers coming in like crazy here. So Scott has the fun part of trying to pick that first person who got their answer in quickly. And I know a lot of you are eager and still entering away.
That's Nicole. Thank you ever so kindly, Nicole. We and for all our winners tonight, what we'll do is we'll end up reaching out to you on the email that you registered with.
And I'll put you in touch with the Reco ambassador, and we'll set you up and we'll have it shipped out. So congratulations, Nicole. Thanks for playing. The second giveaway is from Bright Source Lighting. This is going to be an awesome prize for those of us who like to have hands-free or awesome handheld light source. So this is a great one, another super supporter for us here. This question is something that Brad brought up, and I thought it was an excellent reminder. We talk a lot about it in our snow safety program. The question is, if you leave the ski area boundary, head into the backcountry, who is responsible for your safety? Holy smokes.
Look at them go. Look at them go. It's a short answer.
They all queued up. It is a short answer that makes it fun and easy and fast.
Yeah. I can't even scroll my mouse fast enough to get up to the top. Okay, there we go. Tessa says that you are responsible for your own safety. Would that be accurate?
It is. I'm responsible for my safety, Brad for his, Scott for his, and everyone else for theirs. It's a good reminder because if there isn't ski patrol out there, search and rescue isn't sitting waiting behind a tree waiting to help you. They're off running their lives and doing their thing. So we are all responsible for our own safety once we leave that controlled recreation area. Keep that in mind and be very conscious of the decision to head out there. Last but not least, and I'd say it's the biggest one, I've had some drums, I'd get them going. Oh, I'm sure that made Scott think that he's going to get drums for next webinar, I guarantee you. No, he won't. Okay. This one is a few factors to the answer. Brad also brought this to our attention. Great reminders or introduction for those who it wasn't a reminder for. The question is, what 3 factors are involved in an avalanche? What 3 factors are involved in an avalanche? Scott brought this up fairly early in his session tonight, and there are 3 key pieces that are involved, and I sent that answer to Scott so he knows what we're looking for.
Yeah, even before you finished speaking, Nick did say the 3 things that you need in order to have an avalanche, which are snow, terrain, and a trigger.
Nice. Perfect. Brad, thanks for supplying the content for our questions, even though you didn't know it was happening that way. That's how we run the workshop, and it makes it timely, helpful, good reminders, and it really sums up our presentations and our webinars super well here. So thanks again, Brad, personally to you from our team at BC SARA and BC AdventureSmart for being our guests tonight. And again, back to all your teammates there at AvCan and Ravi, you do a wonderful job. Thank you. I was about to say, could we all give our guest a special hand here, but it looks like everyone's already jumped ahead and are giving thumbs up and hearts and claps. So Thank you for doing that before I even prompted you.
Yeah.
We'll continue some of those thumbs up. Thanks, Scott, our tech support. He does an excellent job every webinar. Couldn't do it without him. And we couldn't do this without you. Thank you for taking the time this evening before you head out there for your next winter adventure. We wish you all the best this winter on the snow. We can't wait to get out there ourselves. And this really does help you as you head out there and set you up for success, helps you reach your destination, home, away, another reminder. And really, it helps the 3,400 search and rescue volunteers in the province of BC. Thanks. And hopefully you join us for our next one. It's next week, December 12th. And we look forward to seeing you again throughout the winter. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Good night, folks.